Hi, I'm Dene Stuart, and I'm the founder of the Thinking Revolution and the Exceptional Leader Academy. And I'd just like to say a massive thank you to Drew for inviting me along today to present this little piece to you. What's it all about? It's about the fact that we all experience problems. And what I'd like to suggest to you today is that the way we come through our problems is by understanding the way we think. And so the proposition is really this: if you are experiencing, say, some problems consistently, to come through those problems, you've really got to have a thinking revolution. So a bit about me. Why should you listen to me? How can I talk about this subject with sort of any credibility? Well, first of all, I've written 3 books, all around the brain, the mind, and how it works. But I'm not a scientist. I'm not a psychologist. Actually, I'm a business person. My career has been in business, and I've worked for big corporates, and I've had my own businesses. I've got my own business now. So the angle at which I come at this subject is from a very practical approach to how thinking affects the results that we experience in life. I'd like to ask you a question. Have you ever wondered why things happen the way they do? I'd like to take you back and picture a flat. I'm sitting on the floor of a slightly stained carpet. I'm propped up against a battered old sofa. It's the sort of flat that any student would actually have been quite proud to live in. And I did like living there. Except I wasn't a student at the start of my life looking forward to what I was going to create in the world. I was 53 years old, and I just about lost everything that I had created. The 6-bedroom, 4-bathroom house with the circular gravel drive, the double garage with the Mercedes, all gone. The beautiful wife, all gone. The exciting, glamorous career in media, the 6-figure salary, all gone. I'd just been made redundant for the 2nd time that day, just a year after my marriage had broken up. And I'm sitting on the floor with a glass of wine in my right hand and the bottle in my left hand, wondering how it could have all happened. The only thing that's keeping me going is the fear penetrating deep into my heart of losing my children, my 2 teenage children who were now living with their mum. And it wasn't the fear that she would take them away from me, but it was the fear that they wouldn't want to be part of my life anymore. That was my driving force in that moment. And as I sat there thinking about the wreckage of a life that had started out with so much promise, I had to ask myself a question: how had this happened? I mean, I'm an intelligent guy. I know I'm intelligent. I've done the IQ tests. I've got the university degree. I've done all the exams. And actually, I'd achieved some great success. So how had I got all that and then lost it? Well, luckily, I still had some friends at that point. And one of my great friends, Anne, she suggested to me, Dean, get some counseling. Counseling? Are you crazy? I said to her. Counseling is for people who can't cope with life. That's not me. But Anne could see something in me that I couldn't. Being a good friend, she didn't let go. Try reading a book. Well, what book should I read? Well, have a go at something like Paul McKenna. He's got lots of books out there about how to change your life. So I decided to do that. Cynical as I was, hard bitten through my life in the media industry, I knew that I had to change things. And that book did change my life because it put me on a path of wanting to learn more and more. And not long after, not just reading that first book by Paul McKenna, but being intrigued by the idea of neuro-linguistic programming and all the things that he teaches, meditation, hypnosis. I was introduced to a book called The Road Less Traveled by M. Scott Peck, all about psychoanalysis. And the more I read, the more I wanted to read, because there was another question in my mind that I wanted to answer. And that was, why had I got cancer 10 years ago? Hodgkin's lymphoma, cancer of the lymph nodes. I mean, I wasn't a big smoker. I wasn't a smoker. I wasn't a big drinker. So why should I be inflicted with such a horrible cancer? And the fact that I'm talking to you today means that I've been lucky enough to come through that. But I wanted to understand how that could have manifested within me. And I came across more and more sources of information all around the link between the way we think and what happens to us. And ultimately, through all of that reading, going on seminars, watching videos, and just immersing myself in how the mind works, I came to the point where I knew that I just wanted to actually do something with all this. And that's when I decided to launch my businesses and to get into this space of helping business people to really understand the link between the way they think and what they're experiencing in life and in their business. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to share 3 of the key lessons that I've learned as a consequence of that journey that I've been on, and that I now share with really all of my clients that I work with. And the first of those lessons is that you must really look at the results that you're getting in your life. Now, as business people, you do this within your business all the time. You're looking at the sales you make, you're looking at the profit you make, you're looking at the costs and keeping them under control. You're looking at what your competitors are doing. You're auditing the environment in which your business works. But how often, if ever, have you ever done that around your broader life? I certainly hadn't. I had been narrow-mindedly focused on my career, earning the big salary, providing the lifestyle, thinking that that was enough. But I was to learn the hard way that it just wasn't enough. It wasn't enough for anybody, and it wasn't enough for me. So the first lesson is really audit the results you're getting in the broad spectrum of your life. Now, there's lots of different ways you can do this. One of the most common, and you can certainly find this online, is called the Wheel of Life. And the Wheel of Life is divided into 8 segments. It usually covers off things like, or aspects of life, such as your professional life, your career, your personal life, relationships, friendships, health, hobbies. There's lots of different versions out there. You could even create your own version. What are the 8 most important things that you want to focus on, that you want to experience in life? But it's an exercise that is really the starting point. I certainly had never done it, and the consequence of that was, and this is something that a lot of business people know, you can't do anything about what you can't measure or what you don't measure. And when you don't measure or think about what results you're getting in your life, then life tends to happen to you. It's when you perhaps start to feel a victim of life rather than the creator of the experiences. So many people who experience midlife crisis, well, it's because they've never really taken stock of the direction that life has taken them. And suddenly they get to that point. And I was introduced to this phrase, and it really changed the way I think about things. And that is this: people don't change until the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change. So just think about that for a minute. What areas of your life are you putting up with because actually the pain is not that bad? And it's the things that we put up with because the pain is not that bad that actually lead us to a point in the end where the pain does become bad enough and we decide we want to do something about it. And of course, by then it tends to be too late. So my first lesson that I really would recommend is take an audit. Think about your life in the broadest sense. Business is important, but it's certainly not everything. The second lesson, and this one really opened me up when I discovered this, was to understand the power of your unconscious beliefs. Because what I came to see through all the lessons that I went to, the books I read, the seminars that I attended, and the teaching that I took on board, was that it's actually our subconscious thinking that is way more powerful in affecting the outcomes we experience than our conscious thinking. And if that's the case, how do you become aware of your unconscious or your subconscious thinking? Because by definition, it's below the levels of awareness of your consciousness. Well, how does this show up? First of all, let's think about that. You may have heard of the idea of the Peter Principle. So the Peter Principle is the idea that people rise to the level of their incompetence. So if you think about that, there's two possible ways in which that aspect of incompetence could be judged. The first is it could be someone else making that judgment that you've reached your level of incompetence, or it could be you. So if you've ever had a thought, a doubt, an anxiety that you've reached a level and you can't go any further, then you've bounced up against the limits of your unconscious thinking. I had this experience. So my media career, I was lucky enough to work at Mirror Group newspapers. I became the advertising director of the Daily Mirror. And we had these lovely, we were one of the first companies to move into Canary Wharf when it opened up. And I had this fantastic glass-walled corner office on the 22nd floor of Canary Wharf. The view back over London was incredible. And I can still remember thinking, not bad for a boy from Prestatyn, North Wales. But in my head, I was thinking, yeah, but I haven't got what it takes to get to the 24th floor, which is where all the board directors' offices were. The limit was in my own mind, and it started to affect everything, my whole approach, the way I felt about myself, the way other people started to react to me, was a consequence of the way I felt about myself. I'd bounced up against my own Peter Principle because of the unconscious beliefs I held about myself. So how do you discover your unconscious beliefs? Well, one of the most effective ways that I came across, and I'd like to offer it as an exercise for you to try, is to think about what makes you angry. or irritated, anything on that anger scale. Doesn't have to be big. Could be something really small. It could be you get irritated waiting in the line at the supermarket, or it could be something very big. But think about what it is that makes you angry and why it makes you angry. And where does that why come from? Because it's only in understanding why you get irritated or angry and where that drive to become irritated or angry comes from that you start to unearth the source of your unconscious thinking. You can do it for other emotions. It's a very, very powerful exercise, and it will start to open up your understanding of yourself. But there is something I need to sort of almost advise you of here. I learned a lot of stuff by reading Carl Jung and the work that he did, the Austrian psychologist. And one of his sayings, which I absolutely love and knew to be true of myself, is this: until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And I came to realize how true that had been for me. But he also said something else. And this is why most people never, ever do these things. They never take an audit of the results they're getting, and they never delve into their unconscious thinking, because this is the other thing that Carl Jung said. There is no coming to consciousness without pain. Because as you reveal these things to yourself, as you reveal this thinking, it reveals to you perhaps all the opportunities you might have missed. It reveals to you the limitations. But it's in the development of that awareness that you actually create the ability for you to expand beyond the person that you are today. So it's not a comfortable thing to do, but it's probably one of the most powerful things that you could ever do. Which brings me to lesson number 3 that I'd like to share. And that was when I discovered the real meaning of the word responsibility. You see, my bet is that you learnt the meaning of responsibility when you were quite young. Perhaps you reached up to touch to get a glass of water or a cup, but didn't quite get hold of it, and the cup fell. It broke on the floor. There's shards of glass or pottery. There's water or coffee everywhere. And someone said, "Who did that? Who's responsible?" Maybe you heard it from a teacher at school. You've certainly probably heard it in your working life, because when we look at things that have gone wrong, when we look at perhaps what you might define as failure, then very often the word we use to try and get to the core of that is who's responsible, or the phrase we use is who's responsible. And what that does, it immediately associates our thinking that responsibility is the same thing as blame, which is a very, very negative feeling to have. I'm sure that you know that. So what's the point about this? When you can flip the idea of responsibility on its head, it becomes one of the most powerful forces, levers, if you like, that you can use to move things forward. So what is responsibility? Responsibility, as I now understand it, is the idea that whatever you experience in life is purely down to the way you choose to interpret the events that you experience. Now, again, this is something that a lot of people find very, very difficult to take on board. They use examples like, if someone crashes into my car, how should I take responsibility for that? Well, the answer is this. You're not responsible for the person's crashing into your car, but you can take responsibility for the way in which you choose to react to that event. And this ties back to that very first lesson, to that lesson of understanding your unconscious beliefs. Because when you can take responsibility for the way in which you think, then nobody can cause you to feel good or bad. It becomes the most empowered position in the world. So what I would say to you in this is, in conclusion, is that when you can accept that whatever problem you're experiencing is a consequence of the way in which you're choosing to think about that problem, you immediately open the door to solving that problem in a creative way. But you have to be willing to think about the way you think. You have to be willing to look at why you're seeing problems in the way that they are. You have to have that thinking revolution, because if you carry on thinking the same way that you've always thought, you'll keep getting the same results that you've always got. So I'd just like to leave you with a couple of thoughts. The philosopher René Descartes said, "I think, therefore I am." And I would just like to add to that, you are what you think. And the final link to this for business and the way you perhaps, lead yourself, lead your business, is this. You can't lead anybody else until you know how to lead yourself.